Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Hello guys, and welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning class. As always, this is civic education and my name is Abubakar Abdul. In this video we are going to be looking at representative democracy. Basically we're going to be looking at democracy, looking at the meaning, characteristics of democracy and representative democracy. We're looking at conditions for establishing a representative government. We'll be looking at merits or advantages of representative democracy. We'll be looking at the disadvantages also. We'll be looking at the rule of law, principles of rule of law. We'll be looking at the limitations of rule of law. We'll be looking at the advantages of rule of law, rule of the majority, and then we'll be looking at minority and the factors that bring about minorities. And then we'll be looking at adequate safeguard of the minority. So let's get straight to our first item, the meaning of democracy. Of course, the most basic definition or the most popular definition of democracy, they say democracy is government of the people, for the people, and by the people, defined by Lincoln. So basically, democracy is a representative government. It's a government where people are elected into representative offices. That's what democracy is. It's a government that is brought about through the process of election. So now what are the characteristics of democracy and what are the characteristics of representative democracy? Now let's take democracy first. The characteristics of democracy include: number 1, representative democracy; number 2, rule of law; number 3, fundamental human rights; number 4, majority rule with an adequate safeguard to the minorities; number 5, delegated legislation; number 6, separation of power; number 7, rights and obligation of citizens; and then finally number 8, political systems and partisan politics. These are all characteristics of democracy. Now what are the characteristics of representative democracy? Basically it's still the same thing, but why they added representative, they're just trying to make them this one is more specified. This is just generally democracy, so representative democracy is more specified. Now let us look at some of its characteristics. They include: number 1 is periodic, free and fair election; number 2 is accountability of the government to the people; number 3 is tolerance of opposition; number 4 is adequate consultation; number 5 is equal participation; number 6 is the rule of law; number 7 is the majority rule; and then number 8 is independent electoral commission; number 9 is informed electorate; and then number 10 finally is the free press, mass media. All these are characteristics of representative democracy. Now let us look at the conditions for establishing a representative government. What are the conditions? What are the steps? What are the procedures of establishing a representative government? The following are the conditions, procedures, or steps of establishing a representative government. Number 1, establishment of the electoral system and periodic elections. Number 2, independent judiciary. There must be an independent judiciary. Number 3, political system and partisan politics. Of course, one of the conditions is that there must be political parties to create competition so representatives can be chosen. And then number 4, we have fundamental human rights. Fundamental human rights are rights of every person as enshrined and protected by the Constitution of the Civil Court. And then finally is the rule of law. The rule of law preaches the supremacy of the laws of the Constitution and equality of all before the law. These are conditions for establishing a representative government. Right about now, some questions are going to pop up in your screen, and I'm confident that you are going to answer them correctly. Here's the question. Welcome from that question. Now let us continue from where we stopped. We stopped at the conditions for establishing a representative government. Now let us look at the advantages of representative government. The advantages. What are the advantages of democracy? What are the advantages of representative democracy? The following are some of the advantages of the representative democracy or representative government. Number one is political participation. It provides for political participation among people. People join different parties and participate to actually vote as electorate. Number two, political education. It educates the citizen about politics. People get to know how to choose or how to decide who they want to represent them and all that political education. Number three, popular sovereignty. Number four, accountability is ensured. Number five, unifying elements. Number six, rule of law is also here. So we have popular sovereignty, we have accountability is ensured, we have unifying elements. All these are advantages of representative democracy. Now, what are the disadvantages of representative democracy? We always know that anything that has advantage always has disadvantages. So what are the disadvantages of representative democracy? They include, number one, the dilemma of the representatives. That's one major demerit of the representative government, is the problem of knowing the actual interest to represent in the legislative council. These representatives sometimes have different interests, even within or from their own people. They don't even know which angle they should represent. They don't even know, okay, am I going to pick this person's interest, or am I going to pick this person's interest? How can we unify all these interests and make it one? So sometimes it's a problem for this representative. That's why I say the dilemma of representatives. Number two, it's too expensive. It's too expensive when you're talking about in the budget and when you're talking about in the salaries and all that. It's very, very expensive to maintain. Number three, delay in decision making. Of course, before a decision is made, it has to go through different channels, and that is a big delay in decision making. Number four, election problem. Of course, when you hear stealing ballot boxes, when you hear electoral malpractices, all these are disadvantages of representative government. And then finally, parliamentary immunity. Parliamentary immunity given to parliamentarians rubbishes or makes nonsense of the principle of rule of law. So those in parliament sometimes are immune to certain laws until they are out of office. So it rubbishes the idea of the rule of law, which says everybody is equal before the law and everybody is accountable before the law. So these are some of the demerits of representative government. And now, you've heard us, we've mentioned rule of law one or two times while I was explaining one of the above items. So now when we talk about the rule of law, what is the rule of law? Rule of law is basically looking at, should I say, signifying the importance of the law in any country or state. Rule of law is basically saying everybody, it doesn't matter what class you are, it doesn't matter who you are in the society, as long as you are a citizen, then you must abide by the rule of law. You are beneath the law. No one is above the law. That's basically the idea of the rule of law. The rule of law is supreme to any other thing. The law in a country is supreme to any other thing. Everybody is below the law. And so if you do something, the law will definitely get you. That's the basic idea of the rule of law. So what are the principles of the rule of law? Of course, we do know that rule of law has some principles. So the following are some of the principles of rule of law. Number one, we have equality before the law, where we say everybody is equal before the law. Number two, we have impartiality. People must not be discriminated in any way. No one should be partial. And that is one principle of rule of law. The third one is the rights of individuals. Individuals have rights, and these rights cannot be infringed. These rights cannot be overlooked. They must be entertained. Number four, absolute supremacy of the law, particularly the Constitution. The Constitution is supreme over every other thing. The Constitution is supreme. So that is another principle of the rule of law. So number six, we have agents must be in place to enforce the laws to avoid possible violation. And then lastly, we have government must rule in accordance with the provisions of the law, not arbitrarily. Government must rule in accordance with the provisions of the law, not arbitrarily. So those are some of the principles of the rule of law. Those are some of the principles of the rule of law. And now let us look at the limitations of the rule of law. So the following are some of the limitations of the rule of law. Number one, we have parliamentary and executive immunity. Number two, we have diplomatic immunity. Number three, we have delegated legislation. Number four, we have administrative tribunals. And number five, we have state of emergency. Number six, we have immunity of judges. Number seven, we have illiteracy and ignorance. All these are limitations to rule of law. All these are limitations to rule of law. Okay, now what are the advantages of rule of law? We are almost done with our topics for this video. So now what are the advantages of rule of law? When rule of law is established in a country, what are the advantages of such establishment? The following are some of the advantages of rule of law. They include that the rule of law guarantees the fundamental human rights of all. Number two, government has limits on its powers and is not allowed to exercise arbitrary powers. Number three, a suspect is not allowed to be in detention for more than 48 hours without being presented for trial in a competent law court. Number four, it ensures the application of the principles of equality. Number five, an accused person has a right of appeal against an unfavorable judgment. And then finally, laws are made public and not confidential. Laws are made public and not confidential. All the previously mentioned are part of the advantages of rule of law. And now let us look at the rule of majority. When we're talking about rule of majority, basically we're talking about the majority in a particular state or in a particular country and how they influence decision. For example, we are looking at the electoral process. Basically the majority, like in Nigeria, basically the majority, the president who has the vote of the majority emerges as the winner of that election. So now let's talk about the rule of the majority. Now we all know that democracy generally thrives. Democracy definitely thrives on the vote of the majority. When we're talking about electoral process, voting, at the end of the day, the person who amasses the most votes emerges as the winner. The person who has more votes emerges as the winner. Now when we're talking about majority, when it comes to electoral process, when it comes to voting, we can look at it from two angles. Okay? We can look at it as the absolute majority, or we can look at it as the plurality majority. Now when we're talking about the plurality majority, okay, let me see. Plurality and absolute. Here basically this is the simple plurality. Is a system in the electoral process is a majority whereby a winner emerges for having the much vote. He has to have the much vote, the bigger vote. Let's assume you have 10,000 registered voters. If one candidate has 4,999 and the other candidate has 5,001, then in this type of majority, where majority voting is determined by majority, in this plurality majority, the simple plurality, this one emerges as the winner because he has more votes than this one, forgetting the fact that he has only 2 votes more than this candidate, but the fact that he has more votes, he emerges as the winner. But then when we're talking about the absolute majority, it's a situation where the winner must have more than 50% of votes from the total number of the electorate. That's the eligible voters, those who have been registered. So let's assume 10,000. You have 10,000 voters. Whoever is going to win the election, let's say you have like maybe 3 candidates or so. You have 3 candidates. Whoever is going to win the election must have more than 5,000 votes. If you have 3 candidates and they all have, say, maybe one has 3,000 and the rest have 3,500 votes, you still don't have a winner. Whoever is going to emerge as the winner must have at least 5,000 votes, which is 50% of 10,000 voters. Even if it's just 2 candidates. You know, sometimes you can have 10,000 voters and only 9,000 will vote. And only 9,000 people will vote. The remaining 1,000 will not vote. You still must have, in that 9,000, you must have up to 5,000 votes, because they are not going to look at, okay, 1,000 did not vote. No, they are still going to calculate it based on the amount of electorate they have, that's the registered voters. So basically that is the rule of majority when it comes to representative democracy. The majority plays a big role because they determine who wins, who emerges as the winner. They are working with majority. So now let's look at minority and the factors that bring about minority. So what is minority basically? Minority in civic education studies, the minority refers to a relatively small group of people within a community or country that is different because of race, religion, language, opinion, or political conviction. A small group of people within a community or country that is different because of race, language, maybe culture, opinion, or even political conviction. They belong to political party, and then that party does not have much members. You can say, okay, those are minority. For instance, check maybe a party like APC or PDP, and then you now bring a new party, maybe you call your party PNA or anything like that, and you just have a couple of thousand people as members in the party. You cannot compare yourself with a party like APC who has millions, or a party like PDP which has millions of members. So that is basically what minority means: a small group of people who are different either by opinion, political conviction, language, or even religion. So what are the factors that bring about minorities in a society, in a community, or in a country? The following are some of the factors that bring about minority in a country or in a society. They include boundary adjustment, they include creation of local government and government areas and states, they include formation of clubs and organizations such as political parties, churches, social clubs, etc. Number 4, illiteracy and ignorance also is a factor that brings about minorities in society. And then finally, choice of subjects and poor education. Choice of subject and poor education. Also, if you like, you can say maybe beliefs and superstition also bring about minorities in society. If you observe, a lot of superstitious beliefs are majorly, especially in urban areas, are majorly beliefs by the minority, not the general public. It's just a couple of people, a couple of individuals, a group of people that actually believe in superstition or certain beliefs, whichever one works for you. So now finally, let us look at the adequate safeguard of the minority. Now, simply because a group of people are a minority in a society does not mean their rights should be infringed. Does not mean that they don't count. No, they do count. They do count. Basically, when we're talking about minority, they do count. Take for instance, a lot of Igbos are the ones in a community. If you have maybe a couple of Yoruba people or a couple of households who actually come to that community, it doesn't mean they don't count. They actually do count. Their rights, they must still be exercised, must still be entertained. So now we are going to look at the adequate safeguard. When we talk about safeguard, we're talking about measures of the minority, how to safeguard them. You understand? Measures that could be taken to safeguard their rights, to make sure that they are not discriminated in any society. And the following are some of the adequate safeguard of minorities. Number 1, we have adequate provision of social amenities in the state to bring about even spread of all essential needs of life to all and sundry. Number 2, we have free and equality education should be given to all the citizens, with special attention given to the minority group. This can be done directly, not through their leaders, to avoid abuse. Number 3, there should be legislative provision in the Constitution for the rights and privileges of the minority group in the country to be respected. Number 4, employment opportunities should be made available for the minorities to enable them fill their own quota, and those employees will become resource persons to their group. And number 5, a department or commission should be created at both state and federal government level to cater for the needs of the minority group. All these are adequate safeguards of the minority to protect them and their interest. Basically, if you observe, that's the last topic we are to treat, or subtopic we are to treat under this topic, representative democracy. I hope this video has been very, very informing to you. Remember, whenever you're confused, you can just go back to the beginning of the video and watch it all over again. As always, my name is Abubakar Abdul. Some questions are going to pop up on your screen right now, and I'm confident you're going to answer them without any difficulty. Till I see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.